Hello and good morning, everybody. It's so great to see so many of my colleagues on the one Zoom, and it's always nice to see folks shaking their shoulders in their chair seats to Luther Vandross. So appreciate everybody joining us here today, and we're looking forward to the discussion that's going to be happening shortly, and as well as hearing from our presenters that are joining us from RNL. But before we jump into any of that, I do just want to give a little bit of housekeeping in terms of how we're going to handle some of the Q&A with our presenters, some of the neat audience interaction tools that we're going to be using, and how you guys can be able to interact with our presenters and each other in the moments to come here. So I want to invite everybody, of course, to make sure that your Zoom display name includes your first and your last name, and then add in your campus name as well. And you'll be able to do that by opening up your participants window, which is a good idea to keep open throughout today's session. And then once in there, you'll want to hover your cursor over your name. It's going to be right up at the top. You're going to click the three dots, and then you're going to hit rename. Once in the rename, that'll be your opportunity to make sure that your Zoom display name is as you wish to see it. And again, we ask everybody to add in their first and their last name as well as their campus name so we can see how well represented your individual CSU is on this meeting here. As we continue on today's session, you'll notice that you've been muted on entry and that you can't unmute for the moment. Once we join the Q&A portions of the presentation, you will get the opportunity to be able to unmute yourself again. And then we invite everybody to come in and electronically raise their hands when they have a question for our presenters. We'll work our way through the raised hands, and you'll be able to unmute then and ask your question to our presenters. You'll also want to make sure that you keep an eye on the chat. There's going to be a few links that are going to be dropped in there to a few audience interaction tools that allow you to really participate and interact with the presentation that's going to be at hand. So you want to make sure that your chat pod is open as well. And then to electronically raise your hand, you will first click the reactions button and then the raise hand button. And that'll allow you to make sure that we see you. That's definitely preferred to you kind of waving at the camera, just because it's a big group, we might miss you in the many windows that'll take up our screens here. And with that, I want to go ahead and introduce one of our presenters here, Justin, joining us from RNL, to give a little background as to his position there, his background in advancement, and introduce the topic that's at hand.
Welcome, everyone. I see some familiar faces. It's great to have you here today, and we appreciate you taking the time to come and hopefully learn a few things to take back to your campuses. The focus of today is going to be quite relevant, and we have some great data to share and some great topics and some information that was gathered too from the surveys that were conducted ahead of this. So it should be very valuable. So I'm Justin Marquardt, as mentioned. I am, my background is in philanthropy. Started when I built a nonprofit in the Portland, Oregon area supporting Randall Children's Hospital. Then got into, spent 10 years at Washington State University as a director of development through their last campaign, the $1 billion campaign, which was successful despite the economic downturn in 2008. And also we successfully named the college, the Carson College of Business, which was a wonderful crowning achievement as part of that. Also spent a number of years as the vice president of individual giving for the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center here in Seattle. And now have been with RNL for the past 3 years. And in my role, I am vice president and senior consultant. I work with our partners and clients west of the Mississippi and also throughout Canada. And in my role, I work a lot with many of the campuses in the CSU system. So wonderful to be here today. And really, the topic of our conversation is we're going to focus on building a major giving pipeline and how this is, it's been evolving and changing, right, with technology and the abilities to do different things, do things a little bit differently with how we go about this work. I come from a long background of major giving fundraising, and I recall having to spend a lot of time on the phone cold calling, having to do a lot of assessment and figuring out who's really a prospect, just based on, it's not, based on zip codes that this person should be giving or and spending a ton of time doing that sort of stuff. Whereas what I really wanted to be doing was making asks and using my skills and things that I had learned and was good at on closing gifts. So today we're going to talk about that, the changing landscape there, the use of data or the use of analytics, and really the nature of your constituents now, what they expect in outreach and understanding is at a much higher level. They expect personalization. They expect a certain level of understanding about who they are and where, what they're doing, and a consistent communication plan and cycle with them. They're getting it from Amazon. They're getting it from Netflix. They're getting it from everywhere else. The expectation is the same when it comes to philanthropy. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brian, who will let you introduce yourself, Brian, and then we can jump in.
Hey, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces. Excited to be here with Justin, Sam, and all of you. I'm RNL's Giving Geek. I myself was a major gift fundraiser, just like Justin, and an annual giving director. Worked at great institutions like Knox College, Illinois State University. And for the last 9 years, I've kind of headed up RNL's research. I'd love for you to follow me on LinkedIn, try to put out something cool that I discover every week. Last post was about my haunted house and how it applies to storytelling. So I like to have a lot of fun. And I've had the privilege as well of creating over 100 podcast episodes at Fundraising Voices. So they call me the Giving Geek, and I have a lot of fun with this stuff every day. So it's great to be here. One of the things I've got up on the screen here is rnlvoices.com. It's actually just a very simple interface for Poll Everywhere. Great technology, as Justin mentioned. That idea of getting feedback from your donors is actually a great tool to use in board meetings. We've got a question up there for you. We're asking you, in one word, how do you describe the donors most likely to make a big gift? And it's interesting, we asked you this in the survey that we did ahead of today's presentation. We're going to reveal the results from that, but we'd encourage you to go on there a couple times during the presentation. That'll change, and there'll be a new question up there, and we'll be sharing the results live. So, active feedback component today. Justin, it was interesting as you were talking there. One of the things that I think about is this idea that pipeline development, or, I think as we say, exciting a greater group of people to make big gifts, right? To kind of use maybe a donor facing way of saying it, is really a team sport. And there's a lot of people who are involved, engaged with that. And that's what we asked you in the survey that we did of all your colleagues before here, and in the survey report that I just put in chat here. You are actually the first to receive that. So we just did a national survey. 189 fundraisers responded to us about this idea of where big gifts come from, is actually what we're calling it. So you will be the first. We haven't released it to the public yet. We work with Sam to get you an advanced copy in that link that's in chat, and I'll post it another time for you there. You can feel free to download that and be the first to see it. But this idea of things really being a team sport, right, Justin? When we asked you where your leads come from, a lot of you said things like volunteers, board members, faculty members, things like that. Justin, how do you think this idea of building a major gifts pipeline has changed? I was kind of chuckling when you said zip code. Boy, I remember spending a lot of time on zip codes. That's not what I'm hearing these days anymore, huh?
Yeah, a lot of leaders in advancement are telling us and telling me when I'm in meetings is, hey, I want my gift officers out there closing gifts. We're in campaign, we got to do stuff now. And I don't want my gift officers dialing for dollars, calling all the time. We got to get smarter about how we're going about this. And I ran into it too. When I was a major gift officer, when I was a DOD managing major gift officers, it was the same old thing. When you'd go get a visit, you get an anchor visit, and then you'd go grab 5 other people starting from A in your list of prospects, your endless list of prospects of, and who knows what, but they seem to have a wealth screen or a wealth rating. Let's go fill your visits, because you don't want to just go visit the anchor and go get that one gift that you're probably going to get or whatever, and then fill it out with a bunch of maybes. So it's changing, and really being able to work through smarter about that. And we'll touch on this here later, but being able to be smarter about how to go about that discovery work is important.
Yeah, there's I don't know if we want to ask for a show of hands. How many people have booked a visit to a community and then added 3 anchor visits so you get your tier 3 or 4 per day? We've all done that, right? So it's like the least scientific possible process. Sometimes we get lucky and we discover an individual, but probably be way better to be using the data. Or this thing that we've been talking about, which is warming, right? And so we asked you, how do you feel in the CSU system that the communications from alumni relations and annual giving help you engage donors and identify potential major or planned giving leads? And what I can tell you is that similarly, when we've asked this question nationally, you're about right on with what we're hearing. So people say, well, it kind of helps. It's probably good that they get some mail. It can be somewhat helpful. Certainly seeing that somebody is a year after year donor, an individual who always gives to the giving day or consistently supports a program, that definitely tells you something. But only 9% of you said that it was often helpful, right? And so even in our own internal systems that engage donors, we're not necessarily seeing the best success in terms of how leads are brought up to us, right? And I was writing a couple of weeks ago about this. And I said, and we'll talk a little bit about in a moment here, wealth ratings are going to take a little bit of a hit here in our survey. I'll share with you. They didn't do too well this last time around, but certainly good to be looking at things like wealth ratings and lists that are provided from a central database. But it would probably be good to combine those with people's actual current recent interests. Justin mentioned you can accomplish that through AI. There are other ways that you can accomplish that. We're going to talk about some ideas, and I would love to hear your ideas as well too. And I equated it to the idea of, if you're going to chase rainbows, you should probably chase rainbows that actually exist, right? So I think the average American would say, Netflix, please don't send my data to anyone. But I don't think very many Americans would say, Netflix, please stop serving up cool things for me to watch. Right? I mean, I think we're all very comfortable with the idea of having things served up to us that might be of high interest. So it's kind of interesting to see that. We also asked you in the survey before the event, and love to hear people's comments. And if you have questions about this, we can go into it deeper. Where do your leads actually come from? And we had a small group of you reply to the survey, and it was a little, it's kind of all over the place, but it was interesting to hear that for the most part, it was either from existing groups that you're currently working with. So say, for example, faculty, there was one individual who said that many of my plan giving leads self-identify, right? And that is something we see nationally. I'm going to be a little bit careful with that. We could probably do a better job as a fundraising industry finding better plan giving leads, in part because we know from research that if someone identifies before they're no longer with us and the estate comes, they're 3 to 4 times greater in their planned gift, right? And of course, you're not going to establish a CRAB, a CRUT, all the great acronyms that I know from my CFRE exam with somebody who's already gone, right? And so the idea that most of the planned giving prospects in the US are self-identified is a bit of a miss. A lot of fundraisers, those of you that respond saying, it's just people I meet with and I find. Well, how efficient is that? Other donors. There's one key thing that I want to draw attention to here. Many of the responses that were received from you indicated that for the most part, you were receiving leads either from things that you did or from other donors or people already in the network. There is some danger that if we continue with processes like that, the existing pipelines feeding more pipeline, we will take a hit on inclusivity, right? So we know that if we don't widen the net, either technologically or through individualized outreach, we're not going to meet our goals of an inclusive donor base, which I know is so crucial to your system and the incredible diversity within California and where all your alumni go out into the world. We have some work to do in American philanthropy in terms of being more inclusive in terms of how we attract donors. And so we're a little bit careful with systems that produce more of the same, because they will just produce more of the same. I guess that's probably the most tactful way for me to put it. So Justin, what are your feelings as you're talking with clients right now, back to your time as a gift officer and also personally having established an incredibly successful charity? Where do leads come from now? How is it changing?
Well, the old days of advancement services, if you're lucky enough to have an advancement services operation, feeding you with leads that were, some were not warmed, but they looked wealthy or whatever. They made a gift and they looked wealthy. It's evolving now. I mean, getting those lists was tough because you really didn't know, are they leaning in or not? Are they truly engaged? What are they really interested in? They graduated in business, but it's going to take me 2 visits to establish what they really like or are interested in. Nowadays, what's happening is those lists are coming to the universities and nonprofits that are doing it well, are actually taking those lists of people. So we know they're wealthy. We know they live in a zip code that's interesting, or they've made a gift. And the assessment's done before it jumps into the major giving or planned giving portfolio. So you're able to do that through analytics, and you can do it at scale. So being able to run them through a warming campaign even, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, but being able to run them through a warming campaign where you send out some targeted things to a group of individuals, and you do some digital listening on the back end. What are they clicking on? What are they interested in? Are they leaning in? Are they interested, or are they just letting it go? And then you get that knowledge and that data. So when it comes into your portfolio as an MGO, that's a warmer lead than what it was of like shooting it in the dark and spending 8 to 9 to 10 touches. You could cut that down to 4 or 5 or less touches to get to the gift.
That's so interesting. So that idea of velocity, right? And I think on a fundraiser, so some of you have heard me before, I talk about fundraiser facing concerns and donor facing concerns. On the fundraiser facing side, what Justin just described as, boy, in some cases, even quicker to know is going to let you move on to the next person, but certainly accelerating the speed. If it takes, and I remember from my training, 3 to 5 significant contacts over 18 to 24 months, case telling us that it takes 19.8 months on average from first gift officer contact to book a principal gift, and that the average principal giver has been with us 3 decades, right? Really interesting to see how we could change our metrics. But then I'm also very mindful that people who have significant resources, and I was telling Sam and Justin that I'm reading Philanthropy Revolution by Lisa Greer. I hope you all have read it. Awkward living room conversations or dinners when somebody just wants to make a gift to something they care about are not great for donors. So if we can remove some of that stuff and use the tools that we have available for us, we can improve the donor experience. Okay, so this is interesting. Justin and Sam, the survey they just came across here, really pretty much exactly where we were at in the poll that we did ahead of time, with basically no one saying that donors are very well-warmed or informed ahead of time. So a lot of people saying, boy, they're not very well-warmed or informed ahead of time. Some people saying somewhat, right? So maybe an opportunity for us to do a little bit better there. I'm going to make a switch here real quick and switch the question, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to compare the system here to the national. So I'm going to ask you just real quick, where would you like to be spending more time? And I'm going to reveal to you something. I don't want to bias the results too much. I'm going to give you the opportunity to respond there to the survey. But we saw some interesting shifts in the pandemic with this question, which we've asked actually 4 times in national surveys. Justin, let's kind of kick off with you here. Where do you feel like fundraisers want to be spending their time right now?
Oh, I can tell you, they want to be spending their time. Well, you'll hear the responses come back and say they want to be spending their time around assessment and discovery because they're not getting the warm leads. And we just saw that in the responses here. But in reality, where they should be spending their time, where does their bosses, where does the president want them spending their time? Closing gifts, using their gifts in talents in those areas to close gifts, not in assessment and doing those things. That's important work. It needs to be done, but is that truly what they should be doing and spending their time on? They need the leads, they need that work to be done. And so they're saying, I need it, but really it can be done in a better way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how things are stacking up here, right? So you made that key point that people want to be spending more time in solicitation. Always get a group that say they want to be spending time in stewardship. I think it's really important for us to be mindful when we talk about accelerating the major gift pipeline, that any time we can shave off of those awkward conversations or misses early in the process or untimely conversations, because I think in many cases we meet with donors, but it's just not the right time. And we're going to come back to them later. We could spend more time on stewardship, right? Which we know is so crucial. The average time between institutional campaigns right now is just 13 months. So by the time an institution finishes a transformational campaign, just within a year, they are in the silent phase or the beginning phase of their next campaign. And that's because we have so many crucial needs in terms of student access, success, key needs that we've seen absolutely transform in terms of food insecurity, mental health, diversity, inclusion, and social justice, really taking off in terms of focus of our institutions, actually interest of donors. I think we're going to be in perpetual campaign pretty much perpetually. So it's interesting to see here. So this is how you all are responding right now. Let me give you some idea, and Justin previewed it there, what people said nationally. And so for the first time that we've done this survey, we saw a very high number of fundraisers, as Justin said, indicating that they really want to spend more time in identification and discovery. I think there could be a couple of reasons for this. I think one of the things that we are hearing is that individuals are saying, we burned through a lot of prospects during the pandemic. Maybe we couldn't travel for a period of time. Maybe we had such pressing needs that we need people to give to emergency funds. There were things that needed to be stood up technologically, things like that. We maybe missed some of that time because we were in rapid close for immediate needs. I think the other component is we're in a generosity crisis, and the book's about to come out. Great researcher Nathan Chappell and his colleague, we're actually seeing our prospect pools dry up a little bit. And people are saying, where are the gifts going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now? I think you're all aware. National alumni participation has been cut in half over the last 30 years. So we just have fewer alumni giving formally to the institution. It's important to note, and RNL is a participant through the Giving Institute and Giving USA, that everyone recognizes that this is not Americans becoming less generous. There are some very significant impacts of the income disparities, but Americans are actually less trustful of formal charities. So while we don't have the technology set up to create our pipelines, while we have been doing things like just asking our friends or the names a dean gives us or looking at zip code lists, we're also seeing the American public say, I'd rather do a GoFundMe. I'd rather give to someone in my local community. Working with the donor just the last couple of weeks, when I asked the question, the donor reported that they wanted to give to the church. And I asked the question as a fundraiser, do you mean the church or your church? And of course, the answer was primarily my church, right? And so this idea of giving locally, if the individuals are far away from campus, even if they had a great experience in the system and on your campus and they've moved on, are we going to be able to capture them? So 93% of advancement leaders want to use their time differently. That doesn't surprise us. Anytime we do a survey where we say, what do you want to do more? Everybody says they want to do more of everything, but we've seen a crucial shift towards the identification discovery component, okay? This is where I would love to get some questions. I hope this sparks some interest. We asked fundraisers, what actually impacts the chance that someone will make a major gift? And not surprisingly, these are ranked by, so we gave people this exact wording, and then they had these 4 choices. And when I do surveys back from my doctoral program, I always learn to do 4 options, so people have to choose a side of the fence. That's deliberate. It's sorted by the number of people who said big impact. And the number one thing, of course, is trust in the organization. Right after that is the knowledge and understanding of the donor's key interest and giving passion. Those 2 top things, by the way, do not sound like a 400-person prospect list that was thrown at a development officer. They sound like a relationship. They sound like something really, pretty deep that is a little different than, all right, I got a list of people who will go to dinner with me or have coffee with me, right? Really interesting to see that people are immediately then rating pretty closely the donor's knowledge of what we're doing and what do we want to do next. So all these key educational components, right? And then look right down at the bottom there, wealth screening with a whopping 4% of big impact. Okay. I think there could be a lot of reasons for that. Again, no one at RNL is recommending that you drop wealth screening. We use it in our modeling. It's a crucial part of what we do. But we know one of the things is that real estate is so heavily weighted in wealth screening, and it's not liquid, at least not right now. And you have seen astronomical, as you all know, increases in the real estate prices for your, so talking to the CSU system, I don't think there's any group that we could go to where we would be saying this more. It's an interesting, we need to adapt those systems to make them better. So a lot of fundraisers are saying that wealth screening is going to have some impact, right? We also looked at this and we said it was interesting to see that so few fundraisers nationally indicated to us that the donors' engagement and content was down the list. Now, we can tell you from our modeling, when we go out to a pool, and we'll talk a little bit about the system where we're warming donors, we can tell you that we are much more likely to get a donor to pick up, say, for example, the phone or respond to a text if we are also seeing with them directly and recently engaging in content, right? So we can tell you that AI-driven personalized communications double the chance that someone will take the next step. right? Really kind of interesting. A couple questions about recordings and also the slides. Absolutely, can give you a full copy of the slides, and I'll post again in chat that link. You have a link to, and the CSU system is the first to get this. No joking, we're doing a webinar right after this. Justin's going to join, but you're the first to see it. You have the full copy of the report that you can utilize with your leadership and send out, so that's available. So Justin, how do you think, where we find our major gift donors has changed? Let's riff on that a little bit.
Well, in terms of finding our major gift donors, when we look at, engagement's the key. There's the spoiler alert, but we really need to do a better job of, when you talk about what the issues are in terms of major gift, what's leading to major gift, trust in the institution. Well, what are we seeing nationally? There's a high level of mistrust for large institutions. How do we get through that? Right? We got to be communicating. We got to be using peer-to-peer types of engagements in terms of how we go about, outreach, in terms of giving days and crowdfunding and all the other work that you can be doing to help build that trust, but consistently communicating in a manner of always mission first, leading with your mission. What are we about? What are we doing? Building that trust and building that engagement so that when that time comes for that outreach, when that time comes for that ask, when you get to that point, they're ready for that. They trust you. They understand you. They know you. The way of our interactions in the world today, when you look at retail and you look at philanthropy and everything else, it's highly engaged, it's highly personalized. There's a general expectation of understanding that if you don't have that, if you're pushing out the calendar year and ask and saying, hey, give to business because you graduated in business and you're an alum, it's changed. It's not like that anymore. You got to get smarter about it and build that.
Yeah, it's we think about what some of the major corporations, it wasn't Patagonia. Didn't they just give away the company? I'm trying to remember if that was right. Some of the key shifts that we're seeing happening out there in the world in terms of meaning and purpose. Let's not neglect stewardship, big component. We saw that out there. Consistent communication, the number one thing that people said to us in the national survey. What people, I was talking with a fundraiser at Emory saying, his top goal is to say, we have so many experts, and the CSU system, I think, is very similar to this. We have so many experts that people want to interact with. We should be focusing on that. Yeah, we're still going to do donor visits. We're not going to totally upend what advancement is, but content, communication, consistency, building that relationship is so crucial. I don't know if anyone in the CSU system did this. Please post in chat if you have an example for us. But one of the things that was interesting, we had an institution in Texas when the pandemic first hit. They actually sent out a text saying, hey, this coronavirus thing, we don't really know what it is, but I don't know what it is, but I have these great experts on campus that have been studying it for a few years. You want to just get on a Zoom and let's talk about it? So the institution then becoming a hub of information for alumni and supporters down the road, where we can tackle major world issues and engage people with the experts on our campus. I think about the number of times that I tried to convince a faculty member to go with me on a donor meeting. I did this in recruitment as well too. And they're like, can I get on a plane, do this? Go to a faculty member and say, hey, will you do a webinar just talking about your research so people know what they're giving to? You're going to get a yes on that, right? And people can do that pretty friction-free. We've all been able to interact with donors virtually. And so I think a lot of ways that we can build that relationship. All right.
And I think, Brian, you're really quickly, I just want to touch on something there that I think is super important when we're talking about what happened during the pandemic and consistent communication and why it matters. The data points are showing nationally that those who decided to not do anything during the pandemic and shut down their centers and shut down their outreach and said, we're just not going to do it, it's not appropriate, they are struggling to get back to even pre-pandemic numbers. But the ones that, and I think the data point is what, 70% of those are not back?
72% of institutions have not returned to their donor count pre-pandemic. Exactly.
And the ones that did, the ones that powered through it, and I say powered through it, but the ones who just consistently communicated, the ones who pivoted and said, you know what, we have opportunities to help students in the emergency fund and things that were related. People step up in times of need, number one, but number two, there was consistent communication. And what it's led to is those organizations that did that have seen growth out of beyond what their pre-pandemic numbers were.
I love that. And thanks for all your responses. Seeing very similar things to things we saw nationally. I'm going to show you that in just a moment here so you can see that. I like Boomer. That's good. We still have a lot of wealth in our remaining baby boom generation. Don't forget those skeptical and uninvolved Gen Xers like me. I'm the guy that when raising some money to honor my friend at my alma mater said in a meeting, I am not interested in giving to your structural budget deficit. The VP there almost fell off her chair, but I did cut a big check, so spared her from that. They laughed at me a little bit, but yeah, we see some huge generational differences. I think very similar to what we saw nationally there. And these are the words that people used in the national survey. I've really been looking at words like partner. I think this idea that people are philanthropic, right? So I think one of the revolutions we're experiencing is we're starting to look at where people are giving otherwise, because people who have a philanthropic plan in place are just much more likely to be able to join our institutions. We did see a number of people nationally indicate friends and that they're moving outside of just the alumni base in terms of their potential contributors. So that's what we heard nationally. I think what we could see from our CSU gift officers and big gift engagers is some fairly similar things. Some things that might be a little bit different. We can go back to what you said, and that's still up there, and you can continue to do that. Visionary, love to see that, right? We're definitely going to see that in a system with all the great things that you're doing. Qualified, right? So like, are people actually, available and ready for us? Passionate, loyal, definitely looking at gift loyalty as a big contributor. There are going to be some major and planned gift donors who are already loyal annual givers, but it's probably only going to be about a quarter at the biggest fundraising charity. So this is what you're saying right now. By the way, this technology, this word cloud technology, I use Poll Everywhere. There's a couple other pieces of software out there, really fun to use in board meetings, to use in your team meetings. If any of you resent any of the words here, it would actually get bigger. So you can kind of look at sentiment and things like that. One of the pieces of research that we know is that in a large team, when you provide anonymous response technology, you will have different people respond because some people just don't like that group environment. And so always encourage people to have that kind of interactive component so we can be inclusive in our communication in our meetings. So have some fun with that. All right, Sam, I'm hoping we have some questions. I certainly can come up with some, but did we have any questions get upvoted there? And do we have some things we want to jump in with?
I'll looking at the questions now here, but there's a few things that you mentioned that I think really speaks to some of the DNA of the CSU. For instance, on average, only 4% of all the giving to the CSU is unrestricted. So very much our donors are motivated by looking at the impact of their giving in the CSU. That they really are looking to some of those specific items that you mentioned as well. So I think this is right on brand with the giving that we have here at the CSU. Looking at the Mentee pod, doesn't look like anybody shared any questions there, but everybody now has the ability to unmute themselves. So you guys are also welcome to raise your hand and share any thoughts or questions in terms of all the interesting data that was shared by Brian earlier here. I know this slide in particular caught some people's eyes. I don't think it's a coincidence that folks asked for the slide deck right when this one was up. So yeah. I think that there might be some opinions and thoughts on at least from individual perspective in terms of what the focus is and what drives kind of giving. So folks are of course welcome to raise their hand and get ready to share that thought here with the group. It's a friendly group of colleagues, so you guys are more than welcome to do so. Annie, brave soul, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, I got stuck trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Annie. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for having this session. The question I had actually on that slide about what impacts a major gift, if you can talk more about the sources of this data and what's like the timeline, how recent or how often was this collected?
Okay. And so this is actually a survey of fundraisers that just completed 2 weeks ago, and we had 198 responses. So we asked fundraisers themselves what they think has an impact. And it was just this very specific, we always print the exact words that we use there. And so it's just under 200 fundraisers that responded to this survey and told us that. Now, you want to talk about national research? This is absolutely what we're seeing nationally, that idea of trust and a relationship are what's coming through. If we look at sources like Penelope Burke, if we're looking at recent research from the Pew Trust as well too, that's what we're seeing. As Sam reported, that idea of restricted giving to a very specific thing is an incredible multi-decade trend that we've seen. So we can share with you afterwards. We can have Justin send this out. A research study that we did on young alumni, which was funded by the Schuler Education Foundation. We surveyed over 75,000 young alumni, and I think we had some CSU institutions participate in that. It was the largest survey of young donors that's ever been done, and we asked them, where did they want to give? I'll pause in a second and show that up, and I can tell you a very, very small number of them are interested in giving to the annual fund. But what's interesting is that the top things they want to give to, scholarships, inclusivity, helping students directly, are all things that our annual giving programs support. So our recommendation as a company is not to stop those broad-based efforts, but to really lean into where the impact is being had. We can share those results with you directly. It's like we were really excited about the survey, and then coronavirus happened. So it did occur right before coronavirus. It was occurring at a time where there were some significant diversity, inclusivity, and social justice issues. And so that was top of mind for many donors. But it's interesting because when we did those donor surveys, we didn't do them anonymously. So institutions had the ability to know who said what. Now, there was a double blind, so I wouldn't be able to tell what Justin said. But we could group donors and say, well, this is a group of people who care about X or a group of people who care about Y. When the institutions then went back and applied that methodology of saying, we want to reach out to young people with the specific things that they said in a survey that they cared about, they saw massive increases, and the 5 pilot institutions that tried that doubled their alumni participation and saw upwards of 70% donor retention in the second and third year. So one of the things you'll hear from me if you're ever at a case conference is that, yes, young alumni participation is down, except at any place that it's actually tried. So just about anything that we hear about a group of donors not doing X is mostly about lazy fundraisers. I'll be very direct with that. So when we apply the strategy that we're seeing in the commercial world, when we apply strategy that's being applied by incredibly successful causes, social action causes, we can see similar levels of results. And so really interesting to kind of see as things change what we're learning about donors. I think a lot of institutions have had to change the way they're doing things because their pipelines are kind of drying up.
Yeah. I will add to that really quickly because we're on the topic. I think this is a very relevant point to think about is you look at the population and what's happening. Baby boomers and Gen X's are they're aging out. Half the US population really falls into that space of a young alumni. And if you look at the data and the research, and we can actually, I think we've got the link up or we'll send it to you of some of the findings here, you're going to find that the young alumni group is, number one, highly philanthropic. And number two, they have a lot of wealth. They have a lot more wealth than you might think. It's over 36% of them can give $500 and above. And many of them are leaning in and giving. They're just not being asked and they're not being approached in the right way, in a personalized, I know you, understanding kind of way. And so what they're saying is, hey, show me the impact, talk about your mission, consistently communicate, show me that you know me, and I'm going to lean in and give to your organization. And as you think about the future and you think about building your pipeline, you got to take that into account because, one of the best bits of advice I got, the person who named our college, Scott Carson, he was the CEO of Boeing, leaned in, he says, I'm making this gift. This is great. I'm so excited. My family's excited, but who's next? Who's going to be there in that next campaign? Because he cared so much about the institution. He's like, but it's not going to be me next time. I'm done. I'm tapped out. This is awesome, but who's next? And so you got to be thinking about that as you're building that pipeline. The millennials, those that are coming up, not only do they have wealth of their own, they're also going to be inheriting a great deal of wealth because the baby boomers are going to be moving on and it's going to be passed down and they're going to be thinking about all of that stuff.
100% agree. I sent you the survey results there. You can take a look at that. And Justin and I are available if you want to follow up with your teams and talk a little bit about that You have an incredible number of young alumni in your databases, and the CSU institutions I've worked with, they're overwhelming, just given the enrollment growth that you've seen in the state. Sam, we have anybody else that's raised their hand? Or we want to move on and talk a little bit about what do you actually do?
Well, I think someone is preempting the next section here. Cheryl's wondering if we could share some examples of low friction engagement opportunities, but it looks like that's where we're going.
Okay, the answer is texting and surveying. We'll talk a little bit about that, but yeah, a digital wallet, Santa Clara, we should pull that up too, Justin. So let's talk a little bit about the way that we've been doing those things. We talked about that idea of filling in appointments before we fly or drive. When we've surveyed gift officers before, basically none of them say that they have any problem talking with the donor or making the ask. They all have huge problems getting appointments. And I remember that was a big struggle. I would say it probably led to the reason why I moved on from gift officer work, just getting appointments. We have incredibly stressed out and overburdened prospect research teams trying to find these potential donors for us to meet with. A lot of us are doing things like using Google, LinkedIn can be very valuable. I would, of course, Google a donor, would, of course, check them out on LinkedIn before I met with them. But you're not going to be able to create a pipeline at scale in that way, right? And in many cases, we're seeing huge prospect lists with the average fundraiser in the US only able to visit about half of their assigned prospects in any given year. What's interesting about it as well, too, is that if you have success, we will need to spend such a significant amount of time documenting a complex restricted gift that actually success can mean that your pipeline can quickly dry up. And some of you may have been in that situation. What's happening to the pipeline? Well, I'm spending days and months documenting a very significant gift, and now I'm going to go back and prospect again. So what's changed is that we're getting involved in things like predictive modeling. And this is predictive modeling, not at the level of just who is a potential major giver, but also who is ready to give now. So when we talk about predictive modeling, we're talking about really looking at who are the people who are clicking, watching videos, all those things, really looking at the idea of personal outreach at scale. And I can tell you that our company, which many of you have known for decades as being very involved in the phone, and we revolutionized that. Many of you have received a call from your alma mater asking for money. As a 50-50 chance it was one of our kids that did it. So we had been the big player in that. When we shifted in the just before the pandemic and then accelerated by the pandemic to combine strategies of things like texting and video messages at scale at the same time, we saw 500 to 1,000% increase in ROI for those centers. So plenty of examples of donors who are saying, oh yeah, I just need to hurry up and give, and then they make a $2,500 gift from a text message, right? You can only accomplish those things in an integrated platform, right? Low friction one-on-one engagement opportunities. Those are going to be things like those Zoom meetings with faculty, increasingly hearing from gift officers that they feel comfortable getting on to video calls. It's going to be things like texting. My alma mater asked me when students were moving in, what advice do you have for an incoming student? I texted them back. They actually printed that out and put it on a student's bed that was moving into the residence hall. It's pretty cool. Good stuff there. And then I think the other thing that we're seeing is giving days and crowdfunding with the easiest possible method for giving. And what we mean by that is really digital wallet, Apple Pay, Venmo, adopting those systems so that people can give in less than a minute. Great examples of institutions out there that have adopted this are like Virginia Tech, that went from 11% to 22% alumni participation in just 4 years. We show some examples here of Baylor University, who set a record for the number of donors. That's one of the largest increases in alumni donors in US history. People give away a lot of socks, huh, Justin? Experiences, right? You know that as an experience-based fundraising. How would you answer that question, Justin? Low friction opportunities. What are some suggestions you have?
Well, I think if you look at the data over even the last couple of years, the amount of jump, and you know the statistics better than I do, Brian. You can share them directly, but online giving has been jumping year over year, and it's increasing. And you know, when you look at what we went through with the pandemic, when everybody was at home and online, right? Things that was the way to give and engage. So being able to make that as frictionless as possible, using that term again, but making it easy to use Venmo, being able to use it from your Apple Pay from your phone, being able to go online and have a giving page that's a one-step process as opposed to a 5-click process. Those are ways to reduce friction. When you use the word friction, in terms of allowing that gift to be as easy and seamless as possible. And then leading with the mission and, you know, what it is we're here for and why it matters and things like that along the way, just makes it a very easy and quick process there. So, you know, when you look at, I think I saw a question about warming campaigns.
Yeah, let's talk about what actual warming is,
Yeah.
right? And so this is kind of an interesting concept. So up until now, what we've largely done is say annual giving and broad-based outreach or alumni engagement or event engagement is one thing. And prospect engagement, pipeline engagement, or prospect research is another thing. It involves us Googling and checking on people and buying data sources, and then we just have gift officers relentlessly pursue them. Those two things have absolutely in American philanthropy operated in silos. And what we're suggesting is that we want to go from silos to a symphony. So there are many instruments that you're going to play to engage a donor, and donor warming is about that symphony. So it's going to be things like coordinated social media, digital advertising that occurs at the same time as direct mail. Should have put a QR code example here, but direct mail with a digital footprint, because people can then use a QR code to go ahead and give. Emails where you're tracking people's content views, even going as far as to saying, well, we're going to put this through an AI-driven engine. Ours is called Quadrangle, where we're going to catalog our content, we're going to listen to what donors click on, and then over time there's actually going to be variable buckets in those emails where donors get things specific to their interests, just like Netflix, Amazon, Spotify, right? So what's happening during this warming process is you're getting donors ready, and then you're also listening for the donors who seem to be responding. And it's across multiple channels. It takes a lot of effort to kind of coordinate things and get it done. We actually suggest that donor warming not occur 50,000 at a time, might even occur as succinctly as 5,000 at a time, really hoping to get to the 100 most highly wealth rated and engaged people that we're going to then send you out to. So it's a really totally different way of looking at the way that we get prospects ready. And so as opposed to saying, well, this mailer goes out on this day, this mailer goes out on this day, it's more of a pulsing that occurs. We did this with Loma Linda University. Justin, I'm trying to remember, it's like something like 2,700 X ROI. But basically, for a relatively small investment, they raised over $4 million. And the prospect for them was that they had 1,900 people on lists that they thought had some significant wealth, that they said, we will never be able to get to these people by the end of the campaign. We don't have the gift officer bandwidth. And so, you know what? Let's go out there and engage them and find the ones who are the most interested. And it really kind of changed the way that things are done. And so it's Baylor's a perfect example. This appeal goes out, right, for the campaign, for the Give Light campaign. At the same time, the digital ads about getting your socks are hitting. At the same time that an email with the Give Now and the digital wallet are hitting, right? Really cool, celebrating traditions. I'm trying to remember, we did a thing for SMU recently, and we found that the most effective communication they did was their birthday texting. They're seeing this astronomical, like 10x their normal donor response rate when they sent out a birthday text to people, just utilizing the database. And so it's really, I think, thinking about how we engage donors differently. It's again, not saying, silo, annual giving does this, marketing does this, but saying, how does this become a symphony for people? I don't know. Yeah, hokey metaphor. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think, I'd love to call an example of this, and I'd love to get his feedback if he's willing, is Grant from Cal Poly SLO is on today. And I know, Grant, you had, we had engaged and talked about this issue of, you guys had what you called the holding tank, right? We all had those. We all had the big lists of names. What were some of your thoughts around why you decided to go into a warming program like that, if you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might be best to frame this out and talk a little bit about some of the changes we made in organization. I'll do a lot of the things that you guys have been talking about. And first and foremost, we are a lot of our communicators. So we took our communicators out of donor relations, out of alumni, and out of annual giving. We essentially put them all together. rebranded that area external communications and annual giving, and just completed a hire for that space. But the idea is we recognize that our donors were receiving, I mean, very different communications and look and feel and content from these three separate areas. And the reality is we really wanted to create some continuity. And then really the next step was to talk with R&L, see if we could elevate the level of all of our external communications, including our digital, including our email, including our direct mail. And I think the combination of the two things is really starting to work for us. Our messages are far more consistent. We have elevated, I think, the look and feel of all of our pieces and working through R&L, and we're starting to see the response rates tick up. So I feel like we're kind of in early stages. We worked with R&L to do a spring campaign and kind of kick the tires and see what was possible. We contracted with them for this year, and so far things are going well. And happy to, sort of chime in maybe just post calendar year end and let you know how things are going sort of in our first 6 months. But like I said, from my perspective, it was a little bit of an organizational change and a brain shift, and then it was working with R&L to see if we can create that continuity that we were looking for, but also elevate some of our pieces.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Grant, and I appreciate the testimonial. But really, as you think about what you guys were up against, right? You had, I think it was something like 15,000 what you would consider major giving suspects or prospects that needed to be discovered, and or figured out as to who's really a viable prospect or not. And you as AVP, you didn't have the staffing to go out and hit the road and go figure that out. And so the ability to use that. In terms of talking about what we're doing here, being able to use the analytics to whittle that number down from 15,000 to a couple thousand, and then using the warming campaign of the digital advertising, the customized email, and the direct mail, and being able to then digitally listen, where are they clicking, who's leaning in through that process, then allows you to whittle that number down to who's really the prospects out of that. And then gave you, it's going to give you that as we get through the program here this year, the ability to go then have your major gift officer go and close, as opposed to have to go and discover.
Yeah, and happy to elaborate on that a little bit. So the numbers we had 14,000 alums, a little bit of a glut of riches here. We had 14,000 alums who had a wealth ranking of 2 million plus. And again, this is all from different data sources. And part of what we were trying to do is validate some of the due diligence that we've done. But 14,000 folks that had a propensity score of 90 to 99. And a wealth rating of $2 million. But we didn't really know what that meant in the grand scheme of things, and we're trying to figure out essentially where to start. And so to Justin's point, those were some of our first pools. How do we carve out some of this 14,000 and do some due diligence and see if they are actually willing donors, or if they're just good data points. And I think we have all bought into the wealth ratings and bought into the propensity ratings, but I mean, nothing tests it like send in a series of solicitations to these folks and actually seeing if they bite.
But it's interesting, Grant, you said we bought into it. I think Advancement has bought into it. What I heard in the survey, the results I showed you, it was 90% of people were gift officers. Gift officers don't buy it. So it's like, we're not going to stop with that predictive modeling. But what I love of what you talked about there is to say, how do we get that pull down to the people who are ready maybe right now? I think the other component is that sometimes we hear not now. Our standard practice in our industry when we hear not now is to be like, okay, whatever, move on. But I recall a call we got a report from a student who talked with a donor, and donor said, now is not a good time. I'm selling my company. And, I think this is June, July. Our old school Advancement thing is, okay, no problem, we'll call you again next year. What I heard was liquidity moment, right? And if that information wasn't passed along to the gift officers, that financial advisor, if those funds are received before the end of the calendar year, that financial advisor is going to be saying, hey, we got some opportunity to do some charitable stuff. And if we're the organization that's in touch with them, again, not hitting them for the, oh my God, will you do a campaign or leadership gift right now? Because we know you're busy. But if we're staying present with them November, December, those can be college naming, program naming gifts, right? And so I think the other component of that is making sure that all this data is centrally warehoused. We have been working very, very hard on that. I will tell you all that when we got pulled off the road and our salespeople like Justin got pulled off the road due to COVID, we immediately took that travel money and put it into tech so that we can warehouse this data and create better predictive models. That's the future where we see this advancement business going, providing a better data-driven, tailored donor experience. So I was just going to show, like, this is the path, right? So our old path is list, prospect research, identification, meet with people. It is now predictive modeling, that warming campaign, that listening and amassing the data, getting to some level of personal conversation, whether that's the gift officer saying, hey, is it time? Is that working with student ambassadors, which we've had an enormous success with? Is that working? We also have RNL gift officers where we've done this. And these are the things you're actually doing, right? So you're finding who are the best new donors, who are the best planned giving prospects, that warming campaign again across all those channels, listening for the opens, the clicks, the views. What are the topics? Like, is that business major now only looking at medical research? We think that they're College of Business, but actually there's been an issue in the family with, you know, grandma or mom or kid, and that's where their passion is. And we can see that with the AI. Then, as I said, thinking about, you know, who do you have a personal conversation, you know, that's, you know, you can pick different options for that. And then really thinking, by the time the gift officer actually gets the appointment, we have so much knowledge, as Justin mentioned earlier, we might cut out 2-3 meetings. And so what you get is the best prospects, they're educated, engaged, involved, those words that you all put on the screen, they're ready, and they have actual interest. We know what they want, and we know what to do next, because they said, you're in the will, or no, we're really focused on this, or we're focused locally. Okay, let's, you know, do this. And then finally, getting the actual appointment. I'd say probably our biggest gift to you is that we can get you the actual appointment. That's what we feel very confident about. So lots of different ways that this can be accomplished, but it's a very different way of looking at the donor pipeline than what we've done traditionally, which I think unfortunately puts a lot of the onus on the gift officers, and it puts a lot of onus on the prospect research. I'll just say this: you are not all pipeline professionals. You are natural human connectors. We ought to put most of your time into that authentic human connection and put systems in place that tee those up for you. Is that fair, Justin?
Yeah, that's spot on. That's what I was trying to get at. You articulated it much better than I did. Thanks.
Okay, well, that's kind of the big stuff. I've been putting up on the screen here what people said. These are the exact quotes with very minor editing from what people said in the survey. We got you the survey links. I do want to make sure that part of this is that you don't feel alone, because the struggles that you're having in your pipeline and meeting your goals are struggles that many advancement professionals are having. That's what we heard in the survey that's coming out this afternoon. And I encourage you to think about that silos versus symphonies. I think that can be a big metaphor for us to begin using. Justin, final words. Sam, what do we got? Last couple minutes here.
Well, I think from my perspective, I appreciate everybody coming here and listening and learning and leaning in on this. And we're all in this together. It's a small community that we're in fundraising. We all see each other at the conferences. We all, have been together, worked together, whatever it may be. And so helping each other to be successful, that's what I love about what I do, being able to help lots of institutions to be successful. And, it's my job to be out there and understanding kind of what the trends are and what's going on nationally, or what those that are doing world-class, bringing that to everybody. And so, I'm excited about my role and what I do. And so I'm glad to see so many people here leaning in and with us today. And if ever anybody wants to chat more about that or talk more, I'm down in California all the time, and love to be on campuses. It's what I do. So anyways, it's just great to see.
I think the other thing I want to add too is that the leadership we've seen from Sam and the system is incredible. Very few fundraisers have that kind of investment that's occurring of saying, how can we do this as a group better, that we're all in this together? That's been quite impressive. That's not something that a lot of fundraisers have. So we've been impressed by that and looking forward to, ways that we can transform the way we're talking about donor pipeline and just help you all do your jobs better.
Thanks. That's the high praise, appreciate it. I did just want to circle back to the parent giving question. I know that there's probably some good examples in kind of the back of your mind, and Brian, I get the feeling that this is something you've tackled in some sort of research before, and I want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to share some insight.
Justin's going to start laughing before I even talk about it. All right, your parent data concerns are mostly yours. Pending the evaluation of your legal team on California law and FERPA, and keep in mind that for the most part, FERPA does not apply to parent records. You can get parent data. So number one, work within your institution to come up with the legal ways to do that and get that parent data on board. If you run into a brick wall about getting parent data, it is absolutely high ROI to come up with ways to get parents to self-identify. So a large way that people do that is to create systems by which the student forwards things on to parents, and then you capture contact information through an interaction with parents. Putting even the equivalent of a full FTE investment into capturing parent data for incoming students is not off the wall, because the average institution raises over $1 million from parents today, and it has doubled in the last 10 years. Okay, so parents have already given us their most treasured thing, their kids. Many of them have invested. I was thinking about my marching band prospects. I was an arts fundraiser at Illinois State University. The average parent was spending over $10,000 a year on marching band stuff. And then they sent their kid to school. Now they were paying tuition. Obviously, there's a significant investment there, but we were letting off parents easy. When we went to these parents and we said, hey, we want to do this event and we think we can raise, $50,000, $60,000 for the marching band. We raised $175,000 at our first event, right? And so there are many ways that you can engage parents. I would say a key component of that is making sure that so when students, and I have a student affairs degree, when students go to college, they disconnect for a period of time. This causes the parents to miss them. It's a huge life transition. If you can immediately jump into that gap by providing content, engagement, the opportunity to interact with other parents who are going through the same stuff, you have actually in the first 6 weeks before any grades are issued, a tremendous opportunity to involve parents directly in the system. I would say additionally, if you have specific populations where English is not the first language, or people in their everyday lives are communicating in another language, invest in translation. It is fine for that translation to be of the initial communications, but making sure that people feel welcome. So I think Spanish is huge, working with institutions in Australia on Chinese as well too. And you have the students that can do that work, right? And so how do we welcome parents into the broader university community? But yeah, if your bosses are saying, oh my God, we can't get the parent data, tell them that the RNL guy said the average institution's raising over $1 million and it's doubled in the last 10 years. It's time to get on it.
Again, getting at the silos that exist in some institutions. So I'll taking a look here on the chat. I dropped the link again to the Q&A pod where folks can anonymously submit their questions again. Just want to make sure that we get to any questions or any thoughts that might be out in the space here. As Brian and Justin mentioned, this kind of gets to the end of the content, but we also don't want to pass up the opportunity to hear from you guys and get your thoughts in terms of some of the interesting things that were just shared today. And of course, a reminder to save the chat there. In addition to the report that's been mentioned throughout the presentation here, there's a couple other companion reports and other case samples that I think are worth kind of keeping in your back pocket. So don't forget to hit save when you're in that chat as well. Wanted to kick up just briefly the kind of the subtext here of making some investment in communications that are development specific. One of the items I know that's kind of unique to the CSU is that generally communications is university wide. It sometimes is or isn't reporting to the Vice President of Advancement. Just curious to see from the institutions, Brian and Justin, that you guys have worked with, what some of these donor experience or kind of development focused communications positions look like, just to kind of sprinkle some ideas to the group here.
So I think that's growing. I think one of the things that's happened is that most institutions now have a very strong tie to the marketing and communications area, We see this, of course, because a significant portion of what RNL does is enrollment as well too. We're seeing that blend together and seeing that whole sort of seamless experience from enrollment forward. That's for sure. I think people are investing in these positions. I would also share that they are incredibly difficult to hire. And I imagine they are incredibly difficult to hire in California because you got some big companies that are going to take young people, often young people, not a rule, but often young people with these digital skills, and it's going to be a tough market. To be pretty bold, one of the things that we do is we have some deeper pockets and we hire those people too. So working with an outside provider can be helpful in that area. I would say the other thing that we're seeing is that when an institution makes a transformative choice to invest in those resources, usually that person changes the game. So a new person who comes in and says, well, of course we're going to market to parents. Let's just do it. It's like all of a sudden those barriers that have been there 20, 30 years of getting that data just fall away because it's a new actor. So in some ways, just leaning into it can change things in that way. But I would say that this is an incredibly difficult area to hire in right now. But I was just going through, I'm going to put out a blog tomorrow about titles. And I went through tons of advancement job descriptions, and we're seeing this particular area of coordinated communication really grow. By the way, over half of advancement positions now include the word engagement in their title or description. 10 years ago, it was all prospect, conversion, qualification, right? It is the engagement revolution, because I think what people are saying, how do we break through the noise? And you think about, I can go back to some of those examples. It'd be interesting when we get them to get the slow examples, right? But what you have to do to break through the noise, right? This isn't just Baylor saying, hey, we think these things look cool. It's them saying, oh my God, if we don't do all these channels, we're not going to see conversion. And I think single channel attribution is over. It is about that symphony of communication. That's what's mattering. Direct mail is not dead. You better get a QR code on it. You better do digital ads at the same time. It better be cool, better be on brand. Did I answer that okay, Justin?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's just like in major gift fundraising, it takes 8 to 10 touches or whatever it is today, right, to get a gift. Same thing goes with annual giving and any outreach. There's got to be a number of touches across a number of mediums to get through. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of competition out there as well. But when you get it right and it's a symphony of things, that gift might come through one channel or the other, but it's not because one channel that was employed isn't working. They all work together. It's a symphony. And there are ways to do it cost effectively. It's not like throwing a bunch of money at direct mail and we've got to send out 20,000 mailers to make it happen. There are ways to build in digital content and things and do digital listening on the back end to get smarter about how you go about it and where you're, improve your ROI on those channels as well.
Super. We're getting a couple good questions in here through the Menti Q&A pod. One of them being, so how is this paradigm shift communicated to leadership to encourage all of this? I find that many are still stuck in the current analog path, and analog probably meaning maybe not embracing digital and maybe being focused on the list and discovery work and touches by development officers. Brian and Justin, it seems like this is essentially your job description, is to convince leadership of these changes. So maybe you can share with us some of your talking points.
Well, I think one of the most effective things that I can do is bring not only the national perspective and the statistics across all these different things and have a conversation about it, but is digging into an organization and getting an understanding of where are they truly, what are they doing right now, what's working, what's not, where are their pain points, what are their goals and where they want to try to achieve. And when you bring that sort of information, and you're all going to get this information for you to help you manage up, really, because there's things like, what are millennial donors doing? What are they interested in? What are they giving to? How do they want to be communicated to? What works? What doesn't? Baby boomers, same sort of thing. And what we're talking about today, the proof is in the data, the numbers. They don't lie. The data says these things are working, and here's why. Being able to use that and have those conversations with the leadership. A holistic conversation, though. It's not just about your annual giving program in your phone center, or we call the digital engagement center now. It's a conversation about annual giving and how it builds your pipeline for leadership annual giving and major giving and planned giving, and how it all ties together, and how we have to have a symphony of communication, and how we have to be listening on the back end. all that stuff goes together to create a seamless, low friction giving environment for your donors. If you do one thing or the other, you're in a siloed environment and it doesn't work well. The proof is there.
So visionary, right? I'm brass tacks. You have a team of 5. Pretty much from now until forever, you're going to have one open position. So the questions we should be asking is, what happens when we have a gift officer that leaves? How does that pool continue to be cultivated? Because it's not like the College of Education or the College of Business or the marching band doesn't need money when the gift officer moves on to a different organization. So we're seeing extreme turnover, which creates a lapse in donor communication. We have to be providing consistent engagement, even when the individual in the gift officer position might be switching out. I think secondly, it's saying to leadership, when we hire a new person, can we hand them a warmed, ready, and identified group of prospects so that they can have immediate success? So within 3 to 4 months, they're not on higher ed jobs looking for another position. Because it is absolutely true right now that with just even 6 months of giving experience, you could be bouncing to another institution and making more money. It is a brutal talent environment, and we need to double down on the tools to keep people happy, successful, and engaged in their jobs. I think along with that, even if you have people who are not going to leave, I don't really like quiet quitting. I don't like that concept. Anyone wants to debate me, we can jump on a call and do that. But I do think the attention to the joy and engagement that people have in their jobs is absolutely crucial. I would say that just about every institution that has an open position right now, if they could repurpose those funds into tools to have people do better, they are going to see just better success all around. So I think that's a key thing to communicate. I think the other thing is sometimes you just got to start small and give it a shot. That Loma Linda pilot was absolutely a pilot. They're like, I mean, you can read my interview with him. He actually said, like, we weren't sure we wanted RNL to call our people. And he listened in on the calls. And we get it. We get it. They're people, you are going to be with them for decades. We're coming in and helping. We want to be with you for decades, but the truth of the matter is your alumni and your parents and your high net worth individuals are likely going to be with you for a long time. And so you want to be really careful. So in some cases, maybe it's just trying out things. What we've seen is things like when we do cut a direct mail piece to allow for digital advertising, so we go to a more targeted group, we're seeing 20 to 30% increased response if we run digital advertising at the same time as a direct mail. And that's with absolutely no one, to be very honest with you, clicking on the ad and giving. It just boosts the direct mail because you're breaking through the noise. So I think it's really thinking about how do you pilot those things? I think the other thing is I heard from planned giving responses in the survey that we did with you. There were a few people who said they were planned giving officers that responded. For the most part, people are saying they're just happening upon prospects. So people are self-identifying. Given there is still a wealth transfer in progress, that seems very dangerous to me. That if there's not an intentional method for us to identify people who are interested in a planned gift, because again, if we document the gift before they leave us, we're going to get 3 to 4 times the amount of money, right? And so it's not about fighting against other charities and getting a better piece of the pie. It's about allowing people before they leave us to experience that joy of giving. So I think there's a couple things in there. It does take leadership to say, hey, I want to try something new. The turnover could be a key component of that.
Awesome. Great points there. Thank you, guys. Another question in the Q&A pod that kind of gets back at some of the items that we have already addressed, but maybe there's 1 or 2 additional thoughts that we could maybe tack on. Someone is wondering, how do we create targeted campaigns for specific areas on campus and keep it as frictionless as possible? Would this be a multi-step process? And we just mentioned a few items there in terms of it being frictionless. Anything else in the back of your mind and in the back of kind of the report that might create some additional success in creating these campaigns? Maybe something in the space of conceptualizing these campaigns and working with other folks on campus to actualize them.
Okay. Who wants to go first, Justin, you or me?
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so I think you've got two paradigms. The first is, are you talking about we know the campaign for the area and we want to identify the people and go at them? Or is this the idea of personalizing our broad-based communication? So Cover the second one real quick first. If the idea is that we want to personalize everything that we're doing, you use AI for that. And that is a process of investing in sending a robot at your content and then having a robot listen to what people click on. And then again, creating those variable components. You're still going to focus on the key things. It's not, you're not going to say, oh, well, we'll let the AI do it all. You're still going to have key things that are important that you want to focus on, but having sections of those communications be variable. So events being AI determined by people's geolocation. Apologize, I'm going to nerd out for a second here. Anybody who wants an explanation, Justin, I can give it to you afterwards. But IP tracking to make sure that you're actually sending events that people are near them, giving opportunities, right? So if you're a scale funder partner with us and you have 16 crowdfunding campaigns, you create a little variable piece that says, let's feed them the campaign that actually matters. Okay. So that's the, hey, we're doing broad-based, how do we personalize? And we can talk with you more about that. It's incredibly cost-effective. It has never been cheaper or easier to use. Okay. Now, if we're talking about, hey, we have an initiative, this is the new thing that I think is coming up. So I've converted most of my case presentations to the idea of micro campaigns. So focused, intentional micro campaigns that have a temporal component, saying we really need people to give by this day, are really becoming quite powerful. Part of that is because there is a dark side to endowment accumulation, and there is a dark side to the successful mega campaigns, because donors are no longer asking, what does my $1,000 mean? There are institutions, some of us very close to them in terms of our campuses, where it's, what does my $1 million mean? And so we have to create very impactful, time-sensitive campaigns. So part of that would be saying, I take a look at UC Berkeley's Social Justice Giving Day, really cool stuff. UCLA's Athletics Giving Day. Okay, saw an institution that said we want to recruit 1 donor per student athlete. So a really different spin on things. I think we're not going to raise $1 million. We're not, they raise a lot of money, but it's not a focus on dollars. It's, we want to match a donor to every student athlete. Super cool. Really important for us to remember that human beings cannot think of themselves as a percentage of a dollar, but we can all think of ourselves as the next donor. So if you take that basic donor psychology and say, how do we make a campaign based on that? You will have a major gift donor who does a challenge or a match. Those continue to be incredibly effective. They basically double response. You want to have technology that allows a leaderboard and for that stuff to grow and for it to be gamified for the people who are interested in that. You want to have campaigns that are much more similar to a crowdfunding campaign on something, maybe a product. Many of us on the call today may have done that stuff. You get updates as stuff gets done. You get unlocks, right? So thinking about those tactics in combination with a time-based, really, really low friction approach, where at the end, the direct mail piece goes to a QR code where people can complete their gift with Apple Pay, Venmo, PayPal. By the way, about 30% when you switch will use PayPal. So really interesting to see, we've seen in our data, and I posted the Santa Clara one there. So saying, how can it be just as easy as possible for people to complete this? I think the other thing we're hearing from gift officers is, years back, gift officers were saying to us, why are you bugging me about these challenge and match gifts? I got big bucks to raise. Gift officers are now coming to us and saying, I don't have enough mid-level giving opportunities. So actually the challenges and the matches, 5K, 10K, 50K, are really valuable to me as a gift officer because it gives me a way to move a donor up. They'll be public in that match and it gets them engaged, involved. They've now become an ambassador. So we're going to be at a greater level of engagement. So those are some of the things you put together. It will be multiple channels, combining direct mail, digital, email at the same time. You are likely to have volunteer ambassadors as part of that as well too, where you say, hey, there's a core group of people. And we've learned from our experience that that's in the range of 10 to 30. It's not 300. You can do hundreds of ambassadors and that can be successful for a gigantic campaign. But really, we see the greatest result for fundraising campaigns if they have between 16 and 30 ambassadors. We'll be coming out with some of that research in the next few weeks here. So those are some of the key things. I think it would be very tailored to the program. I think you are going to see key and beloved personalities be part of that. I think we need to all step back and say, here's a picture of the thing. Does it, one, represent the diversity of our program? And number two, does it represent where we want to be in terms of inclusion? So taking the step back as a donor and saying, what is this picture? What is this package? Some of you may have heard me write about this before, different voices. So one of the key tactics, direct mail piece goes out from the director of development or the director of annual giving. The follow-up email comes in the voice of a student. The next follow-up email comes in the voice of a fellow donor. The next follow-up email comes from a community member that was impacted. Because we know from research that every time we vary that voice, it will attract a different and more diverse donor base. So that's one of the, I think, key shifts. It's like, okay, you got this voice, you know, for the one piece of the email, let's make sure that we vary the voice. And we've seen in our testing that if we just almost no changes to the text, just signed by somebody different, we see a different group of people respond. So that was a lot real quick. I think whoever asked the question should get in touch and we should talk about it, because there's a lot of strategy involved in this stuff. There's also a lot of trial and error. And I think the old days of saying, well, we just know what we're going to do and that's what we're going to stick to, that's probably not the best idea. I think we have to be fluid. That's a big component of it.
Yeah, definitely. But again, to your point, kind of micro campaigns, smaller campaigns to test some things out, to learn kind of what the ropes are, learn the kind of characteristics of the various colleges and various units on campus that you'll be fundraising for, and then what their unique profiles are is smart to do. I'm also just struck at how much kind of marketing talk is kind of we're discussing today. And I just want to maybe make the case that, you know, next time you see a webinar on just kind of messaging or marketing, that you don't maybe discount it just because it's outside of it's in the marketing realm and it's not necessarily in development. So much of that is just kind of blending together, and just, you know, next time you see a professional development opportunity in the marketing space or in the storytelling space, that you maybe take a look at that as well, because we're seeing a lot of through lines through that. Chat's coming up with a few questions here, and then there's one last question in the Q&A pod. Melissa has a really interesting question here. What's the norm for the signer on a direct mail, or signer on a direct mail letter to yield good results?
So I think closest persona to the donor. So if you've got a group that's mixed between alumni, previous givers, community members, parents, vary up the signer, do that in segments and have it, you know, if it's parents, have a parent sign it. So get as close as you can to the donor. And what I always tell people, if the word vice or director is in your title, try not to be the signer. Mix it up a little bit, see who you can go out there and get. It's worth the time to do that. Involves negotiation, working with a volunteer. Volunteers can be big in that component as well too. I'm also seeing that the old direct mail strategy of it being a letter, that those are less common. There are applications for that. So flat letters can work. Usually they're renewals, because that's more of a built relationship. But I'm seeing people do things like letter from the key fundraiser and then sidebar with a quote from a student. You know, letter from the provost, sidebar from a volunteer, right? And I think that is increasingly common, because all the market research that we're all able to create our persona bubble in our social media and the marketing that we consume. And marketing, as Sam mentioned, that's coming at us is so personalized. You got to lean into those things and provide the most opportunities.
Excellent thoughts there. Last question we have in the Q&A pod, something we've covered, but maybe just we can revisit just briefly. Folks are wondering how we get this personalized outreach to function at scale, so across the team. And I think we touched on it earlier, and it's essentially it all being fed into the one solution, and there being kind of the common data set that kind of carries across some of the smaller components. Anything else kind of top of mind that comes to you guys, Justin or Brian, that might make that a little bit more successful, or tips for folks that are beginning to conceptualize what a solution or a tool like that might look like?
Well, I think I'll jump in here. When you look at, you know, when we talked about the annual giving processes or outreach that we've done or we are doing, right, and how you can apply those things to your major giving, leadership annual giving spaces in a segmented manner and have it be more targeted, is going to be super important. And the way you can't, you know, we don't have unlimited budgets, so you can't apply, you know, to say I've got 15,000 prospects. Or Grant even touched on this at CP Slow. They got 14,000 people that they could blast a bunch of stuff out to. But how about we get smarter about it? Because we don't, like I said, we don't have unlimited budgets. Let's use analytics on it. Let's find out of that 15 or 14,000, we really should only be sending to, maybe it's 3,000 or 2,000 people in a warming campaign. Well, that's manageable, right? That's a budgetable item. as opposed to 15K. So then you go, you whittle that down. Then you can go through a warming campaign. But the important thing is on the back end to be listening. You got to be understanding, what are they clicking on? What are they leaning in on? What are they interested in? Or else it's just kind of then it's just becoming a shotgun approach again. So you always, you got to be kind of taking that to task and saying, hey, we got to be collecting this data and understanding and what they're doing. And so having tools, using tools, using partners to do that is super important because we don't have unlimited resources. And you don't want your major gift officers out there combing the streets for all the unlimited number of potential prospects they could have. They need to be spending their time making asks and closing gifts and stewarding for that next one.
And that's great advice. I think the one thing we should also remember is that we have solicitations that have a particular unit cost, and direct mail and phone calling would be, unit cost. Like every one you send is going to cost you some postage, printing, or the time to dial, right? We have a lot of things that we do that don't have a unit cost. They have resource allotments because we've got to create social media. We have to have the talent, all those things. They do cost money. But I would say for the people that, as Justin mentioned, that maybe aren't modeled, we can't predict that they will give, you use the lower or no unit cost items on them and then bring them in. And then I think the other mistake that we've seen people do is once they bring people in to give, they assume, well, they are owned by an area. Newsflash, no one owns a donor. Donors own themselves. It's actually an offensive term, in my opinion, in the fundraising industry. So what we say is, let's get people in through some hook, but then let's provide them a robust opportunity to engage and give, and really a net. So you acquire with a hook and you retain with a net. And that net could have a number of components that are very low unit cost. Other important thing to recognize is that we've seen some very significant research that indicates people who give more than once a year to an institution are much more likely to be retained for years to come. And that's because giving has become a lifestyle. So that's what we're going for there. And doing it at scale, AI is going to be a big component. I would say as well, not everybody has us do everything. We'll work with institutions. Maybe they'll do the texting, but it has to be coordinated, right? And that's the key thing. That idea of operating in silos, those are the institutions that are struggling.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. This is going to be kind of my last kind of notice here to the group to feel free to drop in any final questions into the chat. And as we do that, I'll just reiterate that we will be sharing a recording of the session in a few days, as well with the slide deck, and then links to a couple of the reports that were shared into the chat as well. But if you want to look at those items right away, go ahead and scroll up in the chat and make sure to save that for yourself before you exit the Zoom meeting as well. And I also want to thank, of course, Justin and Brian for lending their time and their talents on sharing some of this information, and for giving us the really exclusive inside scoop of being the first institution outside of RNL to see the results of that survey that they shared as part of the presentation. Thanks again to everybody who joined, everyone here, CSU colleagues that joined us on the session. I want to thank you all so much for spending the morning with us, and I very much wish you the very best of luck in your very important work that you do for the university. So with that, thanks again, everyone, and have a great day, and enjoy the holiday weekend as well. So see you guys.